Good afternoon. Today we're going to be reading through which chapter is it? 21 of Dracula by Bram Stoker. But we're not just going to be reading the words, we're going to be stopping and talking about interesting vocabulary words or interesting phrases as we encounter them. And also, we're doing this live, so if you're watching this with me right now, live, then I encourage you to ask questions. What does this mean? What does that mean? If you don't ask me questions, then I will just stop sometimes when I find words that I think could be useful to you in your daily life, or expressions that I think you probably don't know that could be useful to you. Also, recently, what we've been doing is when we finish the chapter, a couple of people have been joining me on Discord. We keep the video going on YouTube or whatever platform, but some people come in from Discord and we practice pronunciation. We practice some of the vocabulary words that we've learned, but we focus on pronunciation and intonation and accentuation. So if you are trying to improve your accent, if you want to sound more natural when you speak, then you should stay until the end of the chapter, because that's when all the fun starts. That's when we really start practicing. Okay, well, let's get started with chapter 21. Dr. Seward's Diary, October 3rd. Let me put down with exactness all that happened. By the way, put down is a phrasal verb which means to record by writing. Let me put down with exactness all that happened, as well as I can remember, since I made an entry. Sorry, I just want to adjust my microphone. Okay, maybe that would be a little bit louder. Okay. Not a detail that I can recall must be forgotten. In all calmness, I must proceed. When I came to Renfield's room, I found him lying on the floor, on his left side, in a glittering pool of blood. Glitter is something shiny. Let's look at a picture of glitter. This is glitter. So when it says that the blood was glittering, it just means it was reflecting light in the same way that you can see the glitter reflecting light. When I came to Renfield's room, I found him lying on the floor, on his left side, in a glittering pool of blood. When I went to move him, it became at once apparent that he had received some terrible injuries. There seemed none of the unity of purpose between the parts of the body which mark even lethargic sanity. So that's kind of a fancy way of saying his body was arranged in a very strange way. It didn't make any sense. Even if something weird had happened to him, it wouldn't explain the very strange position of his body. As the face was exposed, I could see that it was horribly bruised. Now, bruise is something maybe you don't know. It's a pretty common word, actually, but it's possible you don't know that word. So let's take a look at a picture of bruising. These are bruises. Bruise, bruise, bruise. I could see that his face was horribly bruised, as though it had been beaten against the floor. Indeed, it was from the face wounds that the pool of blood originated. The attendant, who was kneeling beside the body, said to me as we turned him over, "I think, sir, his back is broken. See? Both his right arm and leg and the whole side of his face are paralyzed." How such a thing could have happened puzzled the attendant beyond measure. He seemed quite bewildered. So we have two words that mean confused in this sentence. The first one is puzzled. How such a thing could have happened puzzled the attendant, confused the attendant. He couldn't understand how that could happen to him. Beyond measure, he seemed quite bewildered, and bewildered is another word for very, very confused. And his brows were gathered in, as he said, "I can't understand the two things. He could mark his face like that by beating his own head on the floor? I see a young woman do it once at Eversfield Asylum before anyone could lay hands on her, and I suppose he might have broken his neck by falling out of bed, if he got in an awkward kink. But for the life of me, I can't imagine how the two things occurred if his back was broke. He couldn't beat his head, and if his face was like that before he fell out of bed, there would be marks of it. I said to him, 'Go to Dr. Van Helsing and ask him to kindly come here at once. I want him without an instant's delay.' The man ran off." Well, I think last time we were talking about that preposition off, sometimes used in a phrasal verb, sometimes not in a phrasal verb, I think. But it means like leaving a place. So if you say he ran, that just means he walked very quickly. But if you say he ran off, that means he left this place by running. If you say he walked off, that means he walked away. He walked from this place by running, or by walking. Sorry, I was writing run off, and I said, okay, never mind. Doesn't matter. When he saw Renfield on the ground, he looked away. The man ran off, so he left the room by running. And within a few minutes, the professor, in his dressing gown and slippers, appeared. When he saw Renfield on the ground, he looked keenly at him. That means with a lot of attention. He looked keenly at him a moment, and then returned to me. I think he recognized my thought in my eyes, for he said very quietly, manifestly for the ears of the attendant, "Ah, a sad accident. He will need to be very careful. He will need very careful watching and much attention. I shall stay with you myself, but I shall first dress myself. If you will remain, I shall in a few minutes join you." The patient was now breathing stertorously. Okay, we have to look up the word stertorous. I think we've had it before, but I don't remember. Stertorous. Loud, heavy, labored breathing. But I think it's the kind of word that only a doctor would use. A normal person wouldn't use that word. The patient was now breathing stertorously, and it was easy to see that he had suffered some terrible injury. Van Helsing returned with extraordinary celerity. What is celerity? These are not standard words that you need to worry about, but I just want to know what it means. Swiftness of movement or speed. Van Helsing returned with extraordinary quickness, celerity. bearing with him a surgical case. He had evidently been thinking and had his mind made up, for almost before he looked at the patient, he whispered to me, "Send the attendant away. We must be alone with him when he becomes conscious after the operation." I said, "I think that will do now, Simmons. We've done all that we can at the present. You'd better go your round, and Dr. Van Helsing will operate." When you talk about doing rounds or going rounds, and you're talking about work, that's a type of work where you visit from one place to another place to another place. So if you are a doctor or somebody who works in a hospital, making your rounds means visiting each room. Maybe you have a schedule. Oh, at 10 o'clock, room number 5. At 10:05, room number 6. At 10:10, room number 7. And these are your regular schedule of visiting the same place. It's making your rounds. The man withdrew, and we went into a strict examination of the patient. The wounds of the face were superficial. The real injury was a depressed fracture of the skull, extending right up through the motor area. The professor thought for a moment and said, "We must reduce the pressure and get back to normal conditions as far as can be. The rapidity of the suffusion shows a terrible nature of his injury. The whole motor area seems affected. The suffusion of the brain will increase quickly. So we must trephine at once, or it may be too late." Now we have to look for that word trephine. Again, this is not typical English. Maybe it's a medical term. Trephine. A surgical instrument used to remove circular sections of bone or other material, often from the skull. Let's look at a picture of a trephine. Oh boy. That does not look like something that I would want to happen to me. Whoops. That looks like a drill to open up somebody's head. As he was speaking, there was a soft tapping at the door. I went over and opened it and found in the corridor without Arthur and Quincy in pajamas and slippers. The former spoke. "I heard your man call up Dr. Van Helsing and tell him of an accident, so I woke Quincy, or rather called for him, as he was not asleep. Things are moving too quickly and too strangely for sound sleep for any of us these times. I've been thinking that tomorrow night we'll not see things as they've been. We'll have to look back and forward a little more than we have done. May we come in?" I nodded. So remember, nodding means agreeing with your head, moving your head up and down to mean yes. I nodded and held the door till they had entered. Then I closed it again. And when Quincy saw the attitude and state of the patient and noted the horrible pool on the floor, he said softly, "My God, what's happened to him? Poor, poor devil." I told him briefly and added that we expected he would recover consciousness after the operation, for a short time at all events. He went at once and sat down on the edge of the bed, with Godalming beside him. We all watched in patience. "We shall wait," said Van Helsing, "just long enough to fix the best spot for trephining." That's making a hole in the brain. "So that we may most quickly and perfectly remove the blood clot, for it is evident that the hemorrhage is increasing." The minutes during which we waited passed with fearful slowness. I had a horrible sinking in my heart, and from Van Helsing's face I gathered that he felt some fear or apprehension as to what was to come. I dreaded the words Redfield might speak. I was positively afraid to think, but the conviction of what was coming was what was on me, and I've read of men who have heard the death watch, the poor man's breathing came in uncertain gasps. A gasp is so if you're scared or frightened, maybe you gasp. That's gasping. But this is somebody trying to breathe. Each instant seemed as though he would open his eyes and speak, but then would follow a prolonged, stertorous breath, and he would relapse into a more fixed insensibility, inured as I was to sick beds and death. I think inured is maybe a fancy word for used to, but let's see. Inured means accustomed to something, so used to something, especially something unpleasant or difficult. Inured as I was to sick beds and death, this suspense grew and grew upon me. I could almost hear the beating of my own heart, and the blood surging through my temples sounded like blows from a hammer. The silence finally became agonizing. I looked at my companions one after another and saw from their flushed faces and damp brows that they were enduring equal torture. There was a nervous suspense over all of us, as though overhead some dread bell would peal out powerfully. So remember, dread, that means something in the future horrible is going to happen, and I can feel it. So when you dread something, you just have this horrible feeling something awful is about to happen. And peal is the sound of a bell, the loud sound of a bell. As though overhead some dread bell, some horrible bell telling us about a future awful thing would sound out very, very loudly when we should least expect it. At last there came a time when it was evident that the patient was sinking fast. Sinking is when something is floating on the water, and when it sinks, that means it goes below the water. But here, this means if the patient is sinking, that means he's losing his life. So he's just here on the surface of life, but he's sinking. He's going below. He's about to die, maybe. At last there came a time when it was evident that the patient was sinking fast. He was getting ready to die. He might die at any moment. I looked up at the professor and caught his eyes fixed on mine. His face was sternly set, seriously set as he spoke. And Pachu's here. Hello, Pachu. His face was sternly set as he spoke. There's no time to lose. His words may be worth many lives. I've been thinking so as I stood here. It may be there is a soul at stake. When you say that something is at stake, it means it's at risk. You're at risk of losing it. So there's a soul at risk. It maybe if we can hear some words from him, we can save a soul. If he doesn't speak, we risk losing a soul. And that's actually a pretty good phrase to learn, at stake. We shall operate just above the ear. Without another word, he made the operation. For a few moments, the breathing continued to be stertorous. Then there came a breath so prolonged that it seemed as though it would tear open his chest. Suddenly his eyes opened and became fixed in a wild, helpless stare. This was continued for a few moments, then it was softened into glad surprise, and from his lips came a sigh of relief. A sigh as, oh. He moved convulsively, and as he did so, said, "I'll be quiet, doctor. Tell them to take off the strait waistcoat. I've had a terrible dream, and it's left me so weak I cannot move." "What's wrong with my face?" "It feels all swollen, and it smarts dreadfully." We've had that word smart before, meaning to hurt. If you say, "My face smarts," that means that my face hurts. And the word swollen is actually a pretty useful word because this will happen a lot to people. If you have a problem, let me find a picture. Speaking of problems, okay. See the 2 feet? Swollen means become big, and it's usually very painful. So the left foot is swollen and the right foot is not swollen. Let's see if we can find anything else. Here are some swollen fingers. It's usually very painful. A swollen leg. Look at that swollen leg. Swell, swole, swollen. It's an irregular verb. So that's when something becomes big, and it's usually very painful when that happens. Swollen leg, swollen foot. Oh, look at the swollen eye. I think I lost my place. "I've had a terrible dream, and it's left me so weak I cannot move. What's wrong with my face? It feels all swollen and smarts dreadfully." That means it hurts a lot. He tried to turn his head, but even with the effort, his eyes seemed to grow glassy again. So I gently pushed it back. And then Van Helsing said in a quiet, grave tone, "Tell us your dream, Mr. Renfield." As he heard the voice, his face brightened through its mutilation, and he said, "That is Dr. Van Helsing. How good it is of you to be here. Give me some water. My lips are dry. I shall try to tell you. I dreamed..." He stopped and seemed fainting. Fainting is when you lose your consciousness. I called quietly to Quincy, "The brandy. It's in my study, quick." And he flew and returned with a glass, the decanter of brandy and a carafe of water. We moistened the parched lips. Parched means very, very dry. And the patient quickly revived. It seemed, however, that his poor injured brain had been working in the interval, for when he was quite conscious he looked at me piercingly, with an agonized confusion which I shall never forget, and said, "I must not deceive myself. It was no dream, but all a grim reality." And then his eyes roved round the room, and they caught sight of 2 figures sitting patiently on the edge of the bed, and went on, "If I were not sure already, I would know from them." So he said, "Oh, it really, I have to be honest, it wasn't a dream. It was all true." And then he looked around, and he saw 2 people sitting on his bed, which I guess are the Quincy and I don't remember the other guy's name. And for some reason he says, "And even if..." Wait, what did he say? "And if I were not sure already, I would know from them." So that he's saying, even if I wasn't sure if it was a dream, I would know from these 2 guys. But that doesn't make any sense to me. For an instant, his eyes closed, not with pain or sleep, but voluntarily, as though he were bringing all his faculties to bear. When he opened them, he said, hurriedly and with more energy than he had yet displayed, "Quick, doctor, quick, I'm dying. I feel that I have but a few minutes, and then I must go back to death, or worse. Wet my lips with brandy again. I have something that I must say before I die, or before my poor, crushed brain dies anyhow. Thank you. It was that night after you left me, when I implored you, implore means beg, when I begged you, when I implored you to let me go away. I couldn't speak then, for I felt my tongue was tied. But I was as sane then, except in that way, as I am now. I was in agony of despair for a long time after you left me. It seemed hours. Then there came a sudden peace to me. My brain seemed to become cool again, and I realized where I was. I heard the dogs bark behind the house, but not where he was." As he spoke, Van Helsing's eyes never blinked. This is blinking. So Van Helsing was like this the entire time. Van Helsing's eyes never blinked, but his hand came out and met mine and gripped it hard. He did not, however, betray himself. He nodded slightly, that means he moved his head up and down to agree, and said, "Go on," in a low voice. Renfield proceeded. He came up to the window in the mist, as I had seen him often before. But he was solid then, not a ghost, and his eyes were fierce, like a man's when angry. He was laughing with his red mouth. The sharp white teeth glinted in the moonlight, and when he turned to look back over the belt of trees to where the dogs were barking, I wouldn't ask him to come in at first, though I knew he wanted to, just as he had wanted all along. Then he began promising me things, not in words, but by doing them. He was interrupted by a word from the professor. How? By making them happen. Just as he used to send the flies when the sun was shining, great big fat ones with steel and sapphire on their wings, and big moths in the night with skull and crossbones on their back. Just in case you don't know what a moth is, this is a moth. There are a lot of moths where I live. They're annoying. Very, very annoying. Van Helsing nodded to him, and he whispered to me unconsciously, "The Acherontia atropos of the Sphinges, what you call the death's head moth. So I'm not going to look up the Acherontia atropos of the Sphinges. That just must be the scientific word for the death's head moth. Let's look at a picture of the death's head moth. I think that if you know Silence of the Lambs, that movie, that's a pretty good movie from the early 90s. I think that this moth is also in here. The death head moth, it's named the death head because it has, it looks like a skull on the back of the, it's kind of a scary moth. So in normal English, you would call it the death head moth, but in, I don't know if it's Greek or Latin. It sounds like Greek. Where did it go? The Acherontia atropos of the Sphinges. Just say death's head moth. It's easier. The patient went on without stopping. Pachu wrote Silence of the Lamb. Have you seen that movie, Pachu? That's a pretty good movie. Then he began to whisper, "Rats, rats, rats, hundreds, thousands, millions of them, and every one a life, and dogs to eat them, and cats too, all lives, all red blood, with years of life in it." Oh, you haven't seen that movie, Pachu? Well, if you like scary movies, scary, crazy movies, then you should watch that movie. But if you don't like them, then don't watch it. All lives, all red blood with years of life in it, and not merely buzzing flies. Buzzing is the sound of flies. Bzzz. So that just means buzzing flies means flies making that noise. Bzzz. That's buzzing. I laughed at him, for I wanted to see what he could do. Then the dogs howled. Howling is ow. The dogs howled away beyond the dark trees in his house. He came, beckoned me to the window. Remember, beckoning is when, especially with your hand, when you do this, come to me. This is beckoning. Where was that? He beckoned me to the window. So he's outside the window and he's saying, come to the window. And he could be using words, but probably not. He's probably just making that motion with his hand, doing this. I got up and looked out. And he raised his hands and seemed to call without using any words. A dark mass spread over the grass, coming on like the shape of flame of fire. And then he moved in the mist. To the right and left, I could see that there were thousands of rats with their eyes blazing red. His only smaller. He held up his hand, and they all stopped. And I thought he seemed to be saying, all these lives I will give you. I, and many more, and greater, through countless ages, if you will fall down and worship me. And then a red cloud, like the color of blood, seemed to close over my eyes. And before I knew what I was doing, I found myself opening the sash and saying to him, "Come in, Lord and Master." And the rats were all gone. But he slid into the room through the sash, though it was only open an inch wide. An inch is like this. That's an inch. So the window, imagine a window that you lift up. So the window was open this much, but somehow he was able to come in through that. He slid into the room through the sash, though it was only open an inch wide, just as the moon herself has often come in through the tiniest crack. And as he stood before me in all her size and splendor, his voice was weaker, so I moistened his lips with the brandy again, and he continued, but it seemed as though his memory had gone on working in the interval, for his story was further advanced. I was about to call him back to the point, but Van Helsing whispered to me, "Let him go on. Do not interrupt him. He cannot go back, and maybe could not proceed at all if once he lost the thread of his thought." He proceeded. All day I waited to hear from him. He did not send me anything, not even a blowfly. When the moon got up, I was pretty angry with him. When he did slide in through the window, though it was shut, and did not even knock, I got mad with him, and he sneered at me. Sneering is like a look of hatred. And his white face looked out of the mist, with his red eyes gleaming. Gleaming, that just means it's reflecting light. It's giving light. And he went on as though he had owned the whole place, and I was no one. He didn't even smell the same as he went by me. I couldn't hold him. I thought that somehow Mrs. Harker had come into the room. The two men sitting on the bed stood up and came over, standing behind him so that he could not see them. But where they could hear better, they were both silent. But the professor started. So remember, starting doesn't mean begin here. It means that's starting. It's to be very surprised. The professor started and quivered. Quivering is shaking. So that's what he did. His face, however, grew grimmer and sterner still. Grim and stern, that means very serious. Renfield went on without noticing. When Mrs. Harker came in to see me this afternoon, she wasn't the same. It was like tea after the teapot had been watered. Here we all moved, but no one said a word. He went on. I didn't know that she was here till she spoke. I didn't know that she was here till she spoke, and she didn't look the same. I don't care for the pale people. Pale means no color. So, very, very white skin, like no blood in the face. See, look at me. Look how red my face is. If I were sick, maybe it would just be white with no blood in it. So people who are pale look sick. I like them with lots of blood in them, see? And hers all seemed to have run out. I didn't think of it at the time. But when she went away, I began to think. And it made me mad to know that he had been taking the life out of her. I could feel that the rest quivered as I did. But we remained otherwise still. So when he came tonight, I was ready for him. I saw the mist stealing in, and I grabbed it tight. I had heard the madmen have unnatural strength, and as I knew I was a madman, at times anyhow, I resolved, that means I made a decision and I'm not going to change it, I resolved to use my power. And he felt it too, for he had to come out of the mist, to struggle with me. I held tight, and I thought I was going to win, for I didn't mean him to take any more of her life, till I saw his eyes. They burned into me, and my strength became like water, and he slipped through it, and when I tried to cling to him, cling means to hold something very tight. He raised me up and flung me down. To fling something means to throw it. He flung me down. Fling, flung, flung. There was a red cloud before me, and a noise like thunder, and the mist seemed to steal away under the door. His voice was becoming fainter. Fainter means weak. His voice was becoming fainter, and his breath more stertorous. Van Helsing stood up instinctively. "We know the worst now," he said. "He is here, and we know his purpose. It may not be too late. Let us be armed, the same as we were the other night, but lose no time. There's not an instant to spare." There was no need to put out fear, nay, our conviction into words. We shared them in common, and we all hurried back and took from our rooms the same things that we had when we entered the Count's house. The professor had his ready. That's a weird sentence. The professor had his ready. I don't know what that means. And as we met in the corridor, he pointed to them significantly as he said, "They never leave me, and they shall not until this unhappy business is over. Be wise also, my friends. It is no common enemy that we deal with. Alas, alas, that dear Madam Mina should suffer." He stopped. His voice was breaking. I do not know if rage or terror predominated in my own heart. Outside the Harkers' door we paused. Art and Quincy held back, and the latter said, "Should we disturb her?" "We must," said Van Helsing grimly. "If the door be locked, I shall break it in." "May it not frighten her terribly? It is unusual to break into a lady's room," Van Helsing said solemnly. "You are always right, but this is life and death. All chambers are alike to the doctor." Chamber, that's the French word for room. "And even were they not like all as in one to me tonight, friend John, when I turn the handle, if the door does not open, you put your shoulder down and shove. You too, my friends. Now." He turned the handle as he spoke, but the door did not yield. We threw ourselves against it. Without a crash, it burst open, and we almost fell headlong into the room. The professor did actually fall. I saw across him as he gathered himself up from hands and knees. And what I saw appalled me. Appalled means shocked me, surprised me in a very, very bad way. What I saw appalled me. I felt my hair rise like bristles on the back of my neck, and my heart seemed to stand still. The moonlight was so bright that through the thick, yellow blind, the room was light enough to see, and on the bed, beside the window, lay Jonathan Harker, his face flushed. That again, so flush, actually, let me show you a picture. As I'm sure all of you know, this is a toilet, right? This is a toilet, and then when you make the water go down, that's flushing the toilet. Flushing means eliminate or make go away. So when they say his face was flushed, that means all of the color was gone from his face. Let me just make sure. I've been wrong before. See, I was wrong. I'm glad I checked, because it actually means the opposite. It means that there was a lot of red in his face. So when you say, I don't know why that means there's a lot of red in the face, but it does. So it means the opposite of what I told you. I'm sorry. So if somebody's face is flushed, that means it's very, very red. But that does mean when you say flush the toilet, that means make the water go away. And when you use flush as a verb, that means to make something go away. But it seems to be the opposite here. So his face was flushed. It was very red. On the bed, beside the window, lay Jonathan Harker, his face flushed and breathing heavily as though in a stupor. To be in a stupor means to be somewhere between sleep and awake. Like maybe in a very confused state. If somebody drinks a lot of alcohol, you can say they're in a drunken stupor. Or if they take drugs, you can say they're in a drugged stupor. It's like some weird alternate reality, somewhere between being fully awake and being asleep. Kneeling on the near edge of the bed, facing outwards, was the white-clad figure of his wife. And we've seen the word clad before. It means covered. So his wife was covered in white. By her side stood a tall, thin man, clad in black. So there was a man next to her, and he was covered with black. Black clothes, maybe. His face was turned from us. But the instant we saw, we all recognized the Count in every way, even to the scar on his forehead. With his left hand he held both Mrs. Harker's hands, keeping them away, with her arms at full tension. His right hand gripped her by the back of the neck, forcing her face on his bosom. Her white nightdress was smeared with blood, and a thin stream trickled down the man's bare chest, which was shown by his torn-open dress. The attitude had a terrible resemblance to a child forcing a kitten's nose into a saucer of milk, to compel it to drink. Compel means force. To force it to drink, to compel it to drink. As we burst into the room, the Count turned his face, and the hellish look that I had heard described seemed to leap into it. His eyes flamed red with devilish passion. The great nostrils of the white aquiline nose opened wide. So aquiline means a nose like an eagle, and these are the nostrils. So his nostrils opened wide and quivered. Quivered is shaking at the edge. The white, sharp teeth behind the full lips of the blood-dripping mouth clamped together like those of a wild beast, like a wrench which threw his victim back upon the bed as though hurled from a height. Hurled means to be thrown. He turned and sprang at us. We've talked about spring before. That means like jumping. He jumped at us. But by this time, the professor had gained his feet and was holding toward him the envelope which contained the sacred wafer. Oh, Mohammed's here. Hello, Mohammed. How are you doing tonight? My vacation? I didn't really have a vacation. Well, I guess I kind of did. It has been the holiday season, and I've been eating too much. The Count suddenly stopped, just as poor Lucy had done outside the tomb, and cowered back. To cower, a coward, first of all, a coward is the opposite of a brave person. So if you're a brave person, you're not afraid. And a coward is someone who's afraid of everything. To cower, like a verb, to cower, that's, please don't hurt me. That's cowering. Don't hurt me. Further and further back he cowered, as we, lifting our crucifixes, advanced. The moonlight suddenly failed, as a great black cloud sailed across the sky. And when the gaslight sprang up under Quincy's match, we saw nothing but faint vapor. This, as we looked, trailed under the door, which, with the recoil, again, recoil is like cowering, so cowering is like, please don't hurt me. It's this kind of movement to protect yourself. but recoil just means move back, like, ooh. So they're very similar words. It's the same. It's almost the same movement, but for different reasons. Cower is for protection, but recoil just means moving back to avoid something. Art and I moved forward to Mrs. Harker, who by this time had drawn her breath, and with it had given a scream so wild, so ear-piercing, so despairing that it seems to me now that it will ring in my ears till my dying day. For a few seconds she lay in her helpless attitude and disarray. Her face was ghastly. Ghastly means horrible or disgusting. With a pallor which was accentuated by the blood which smeared her lips and cheeks and chin. From her throat trickled a thin stream of blood. Her eyes were mad with terror, and then she put before her face her poor, crushed hands, which bore on their whiteness the red mark of the Count's terrible grip. And far behind them came a low, desolate wail. Wailing is like crying, like, oh, that's wailing. Which made the terrible scream seem only the quick expression of an endless grief. Van Helsing stepped forward and drew the coverlet gently over her body, whilst Art, after looking at her face for an instant despairingly, ran out of the room. Van Helsing whispered to me, Jonathan is in a stupor, such as we know the vampire can produce. So remember this word stupor, that means like maybe somewhere in between sleep and being awake. Another word for that would be like a trance. We can do nothing with poor Madam Mina for a few moments till she recovers herself. I must wake him. He dipped the end of a towel in cold water, and with it began to flick it. This is flicking. On the face. His wife, all the while, holding her face between her hands, and sobbing. Sobbing is crying, in a way that was heartbreaking to hear. I raised the blind and looked out of the window, and there was much moonshine, and as I looked, I could see Quincy Morris run across the lawn and hide himself in the shadow of a great yew tree. It puzzled me to think why he was doing this, but at the instant I heard Harker's quick exclamation as he woke to partial consciousness and turned to the bed. On his face, as there might well be, was a look of wild amazement, like this, huh? He seemed dazed for a few seconds, and then full consciousness seemed to burst upon him all at once. And he started up. So again, start here does not mean begin. It means jumping with surprise. His wife was aroused by the quick movement and turned to him with her arms stretched out, as though to embrace him. Instantly, however, she drew them in again, and putting her elbows together, held her hands before her face, and shuddered till the bed beneath her shook. In God's name, what does this mean? Harker cried out. Dr. Seward, Dr. Van Helsing, what is it? What has happened? What's wrong? Mina, dear, what is it? What does that blood mean? My God, has it come to this? And raising himself to his knees, he beat his hands wildly together. Good God, help us! Help her! Oh, help her! With a quick movement, he jumped up from bed and began to pull on his clothes, all the man in him awake at the need for instant exertion. What has happened? "Tell me all about it," he cried without pausing. "Dr. Van Helsing, you love Mina, I know. Oh, do something to save her. I cannot have gone too far yet. Guard her while I look for him." His wife, through her terror and horror and distress, saw some sure danger to him, and instantly forgetting her own grief, she seized hold of him. To seize something is to take something. She took him and cried out, "No, no, Jonathan, you must not leave. I've suffered enough tonight, God knows, without the dread of his harming you. You must stay with me. Stay with these friends who will watch over you." Her expression became frantic as she spoke, and he, yielding to her, she pulled him down, sitting on the bedside, and clung to him fiercely. Van Helsing and I tried to calm them both. The professor held up his golden crucifix and said with wonderful calmness, "Do not fear, my dear. We are here, and whilst this is close to you, no foul thing can approach. You are safe for tonight. We must be calm and take counsel together." She shuddered and was silent, holding down her head on her husband's breast. This is the breast. When she raised it, his white night robe was stained with blood where her lips had touched, and where the thin open wound in the neck had sent forth drops. The instant she saw it, she drew back. So drawing back, we've had recoil. That's also drawing back. Draw means pull, and back, that's a direction. With a low wail, "Oh," and whispered amidst choking sobs, "Unclean, unclean. I must not touch him or kiss him no more. I must touch him or kiss him no more. Oh, that it should be, that it is I who am now his worst enemy, whom he may have cause to fear." To this he spoke out resolutely, "Nonsense, Mina. It's a shame to me that you hear such a word. I would not hear it of you, and I shall not hear it from you. May God judge me by my deserts, and punish me with more bitter suffering than even this hour, if not by any act or will of mine anything ever come between us." He put out his arms and folded her to his breast, and for a while she lay there sobbing as crying. He looked at us over her bowed head with eyes that blinked damply above his quivering nostrils. His mouth was set as steel. After a while her sobs became less frequent and more faint, and then he said to me, speaking with a studied calmness which I felt tried his nervous power to the utmost. So he's speaking very intentionally and very calmly, but you could tell it took all of his energy to pretend to be calm. "And now, Dr. Seward, tell me about it. Too well I know the broad fact. Tell me all that has been." I told him exactly what had happened, and he listened with seeming impassiveness, but his nostrils twitched and his eyes blazed as I told him how the ruthless hands of the Count had held his wife in that terrible and horrid position. Ruthless means without any mercy or without any compassion. With her mouth to the open wound in his breast. It interested me, even at that moment, to see that whilst the face of white, set passion worked convulsively over the bowed head, the hands tenderly and lovingly stroked the ruffled hair. Just as I had finished, Quincy and Godalming knocked at the door. They entered in obedience to our summons. Van Helsing looked at me questioningly. I understood him to mean if we were to take advantage of their coming to divert, if possible, the thoughts of the unhappy husband and wife from each other and from themselves. So on nodding acquiescence, so to acquiesce means to give up your argument. Like, okay, you're right. I agree with you. It's like giving up your argument to acquiesce. And nodding means, okay, moving your head to agreement. So on nodding acquiescence to him, he asked them what they had seen or done, to which Lord Godalming answered, I could not see him anywhere in the passage or in any of our rooms. I looked in the study, but though he had been there, he had gone. He had, however, he stopped suddenly, looking at the poor, drooping figure on the bed. Van Helsing said gravely, Go on, friend Arthur. We want here no more concealments. To conceal means to hide. So he says, don't hide anything. Our hope now is in knowing all. Tell freely. So Art went on. He had been there, and though it could only have been for a few seconds, he made rare hay of the place. All the manuscript had been burned. All the blue flames were flickering amongst the white ashes. The cylinders of your phonograph, too, were thrown in the fire. The wax had helped the flames. Here I interrupted. Thank God there's another copy in the safe. His face lit for a moment, but fell again as he went on. I ran downstairs and then, but could see no sign of him. I looked into Renfield's room, but there was no trace there, except... Again he paused. Go on, said Harker hoarsely. So he bowed his head and moistening his lips. Moisten means to make something wet. So to moisten your lips would be like this. Moistening his lips with his tongue, added, except that the poor fellow is dead. Mrs. Harker raised her head, looking from one to the other of us, and she said solemnly, God's will be done. I could not but feel that Art was keeping back something. To keep something back means to be hiding something. Choosing not to say something for some reason. But as I took it, that it was with a purpose, I said nothing. Van Helsing turned to Morris and asked, And you, friend Quincy, have you any to tell? A little, he answered. It may be much eventually, but at present I can't say. I thought it well to know, if possible, where the Count would go when he left the house. I did not see him, but I saw a bat rise from Renfield's window, and flapping is this movement, and flap westward. I expected to see him in some shape go back to Carfax, but he evidently sought some other lair. Seek means look for, and sought is the past tense. So he was looking for a different... We've talked about that word lair. That's like where an animal hides, or where an animal lives, a secret place. So he was looking for another place to hide, another place to stay. He evidently sought some other lair. He will not be back tonight, for the sky is reddening in the east and the dawn is close. We must work tomorrow. He said the latter words through his shut teeth. For a space of perhaps a couple of minutes, there was silence. I could fancy that I could hear the sound of our hearts beating. And then Van Helsing said, placing his hand tenderly on Mrs. Harker's head, And now, Madam Mina, poor dear Madam Mina, tell us exactly what happened. God knows that I do not want that you be pained, but it is need that we know all. For now, more than ever, has all work to be done, quick and sharp, and in deadly earnest. The day is close to us that must end all, if it may be so. And now is the chance that we may live and learn. The poor dear lady shivered. Shivering again is like if you've ever been cold and you started shaking, that's what shivering is. Is when you feel cold and you start shaking. So it's a type of shaking. The poor dear lady shivered, and I could see the tension of her nerves as she clasped her husband closer to her and bent her head lower and lower still on his breast. And then she raised her head proudly and held out one hand to Van Helsing, who took it in his, and after stooping and kissing it reverently means like respectfully, held it fast. The other hand was locked in that of her husband, who held his other arm thrown round her protectingly. After a pause, in which she was evidently ordering her thoughts, she began. I took the sleeping draught, which you had so kindly given me, but for a long time it did not act. I seemed to become more wakeful, and myriads of horrible fancies began to crowd upon my mind. Myriad means a lot. So a lot of horrible fancies, a lot of horrible fantasies, a lot of horrible images. And myriads of horrible fancies began to crowd in upon my mind, all of them connected with death and vampires, with blood and pain and trouble. Her husband involuntarily groaned, groaning as, ugh. Her husband involuntarily groaned as she turned to him and said lovingly, "Do not fret. Fret means worry. Do not worry. Do not fret, dear. You must be brave and strong and help me through the horrible task. If you only knew what an effort it is to me to tell of this fearful thing at all, you would understand how much I need your help. Well, I saw I must try to help the medicine to its work with my will, and if it was to do me any good, so I resolutely set myself to sleep. Sure enough, sleep must soon have come to me, for I remember no more. Jonathan, coming in, had not waked me, for he lay by my side, and when next I remember, there was in the room the same thin white mist that I had before noticed. But I forget now if you know of this. You'll find it in my diary, which I shall show you later. I felt the same vague terror. Vague means like you can't define it, or it's not clear. So she's feeling afraid, but she doesn't know why. I felt the same vague terror which had come to me before, in the same sense of some presence. I turned to wake Jonathan, but found that he slept so soundly. To sleep soundly means to sleep very well. Nothing can disturb your sleep. How did you sleep? Very soundly. That means I slept very well. Nothing could disturb me. I turned to wake Jonathan, but found that he slept so soundly that it seemed as if it was he who had taken the sleeping draught and not I. I tried, but I could not wake him. This caused me a great fear, and I looked around terrified. Then, indeed, my heart sank within me. Beside the bed, as if he had stepped out of the mist, or rather, as if the mist had turned into his figure, for it had entirely disappeared, stood a tall, thin man, all in black. I knew him at once from the description of the others, the waxen face, the high aquiline nose, on which the light fell in a thin white line, the parted red lips with the sharp white teeth showing between, and the red eyes that I had seemed to see in the sunset on the windows of St. Mary's Church at Whitby. I knew, too, the red scar on his forehead where Jonathan had struck him. For an instant, my heart stood still, and I would have screamed out, only that I was paralyzed. In the pause, he spoke in a sort of keen, cutting whisper, pointing as he spoke to Jonathan. Silence. If you make a sound, I shall take him and dash his brains out before your very eyes. I was appalled. Appalled means very shocked. I was appalled, and was too bewildered, and bewildered means confused, very confused. I was shocked and confused. I was appalled, and was too bewildered to do or say anything, with a mocking smile. Mocking means that someone is making fun of you. Someone is laughing at you. So he's smiling, but it's not a fun smile. It's a smile like, he's laughing at her. With a mocking smile, he placed one hand upon my shoulder, and holding me tight, bared my throat with the other, saying as he did so, first, a little refreshment to reward my exertions. Exertions, to exert yourself means to make yourself tired. So exertions are hard work or things that make you tired. So he says, first I want a reward for all of my hard work. You may as well be quiet. It's not the first time, or the second, that your veins have appeased my thirst. I was bewildered, and strangely enough, I did not want to hinder him. Hinder means stop or prevent. So she was confused, and strangely, she didn't want to stop him. I suppose it is part of the horrible curse that such is, when his touch is on his victim, and oh my God, pity me. He placed his reeking lips. Reeking means smelly. As far as I can tell, it means something that smells very bad. Let me see if there's another way to define, because I don't know why his lips would smell. But let's see if there's another way that you could use the word reek. I could be wrong. Unpleasant smell shows something undesirable. No, I guess it just means unpleasant smell. Maybe because he's got blood on his lips. They smell very bad. He placed his reeking lips upon my throat. Her husband groaned again. That's groaning. She clasped his hand harder and looked at him. Clasping. This is clasping. And looked at him pityingly, as if he were the injured one, and went on. I felt my strength fading away, and I was in a half swoon. How long this horrible thing lasted, I know not. But it seemed that a long time must have passed before he took his foul, awful, sneering mouth away. Remember, sneering is like a look of hate. I saw it drip with fresh blood. The remembrance seemed for a while to overpower me, and she drooped and would have sunk down but for her husband's sustaining arm. With a great effort, she recovered herself and went on. Then he spoke mockingly. Again, mocking means that you're laughing at someone, you're making fun of them. And so you, like the others, would play your brains against mine. You would help these men to hunt me and frustrate me in my design. You know now. They know in part already, and will know full before long what it is to cross my path. They should have kept their energies for use closer to home, whilst they played wits against me who commanded nations and intrigued for them and fought for them hundreds of years before they were born. I was countermining them, and you, their best beloved one, are now to me flesh of my flesh, blood of my blood, kin of my kin, my bountiful winepress for a while, and shall be later on my companion and my helper. You shall be avenged in turn, for not one of them but shall minister to your needs. But as yet you are to be punished for what you have done. You have aided in thwarting me, and now you shall come to my call. When my brain says come to you, you shall cross land or sea to do my bidding. And to that end this. With that he pulled open his shirt, and with his long, sharp nails opened a vein in his breast. And when the blood began to spurt out, spurting with that would be like, it's like spurting blood. And when the blood began to spurt out, he took my hands in one of his, holding them tight, and with the other seized my neck and pressed my mouth to the wound, so that I must either suffocate or swallow some of the... Oh my God, what have I done? What have I done to deserve such a fate? I who have tried to walk in meekness and righteousness all my days. God pity me, look down on a poor soul in worse than mortal peril. Peril means danger. And mortal means life. So mortal peril means danger of losing my life. And in mercy, pity those to whom she is dear. And then she began to rub her lips, as though to cleanse them from pollution, as she was telling her terrible story. The eastern sky began to quicken, and everything became more and more clear. Harker was still and quiet, but over his face, as the awful narrative went on, came a gray look which deepened and deepened into the morning light, till when the first red streak of the coming dawn shot up, the flesh stood darkly out against the whitening hair. We have arranged that one of us is to stay within call of the unhappy pair until we can meet together and arrange about taking action. Of this I'm sure. The sun rises today, and no more miserable house in all the great round of its daily course. Okay, well, that was the end of chapter 21 of Dracula. And now, so let's see, we've got Muhammad. Muhammad said hello earlier, and Pachu is here. I haven't heard from either of you in a little bit. Do you want to practice pronunciation and vocabulary today? If they answer yes, and 9-Volt fan said that he's convinced someone to join, possibly, maybe, perhaps today. We'll see. But if you want to join, let me know. Pacha is going to join. Okay, so we're not finished. We're done with the chapter, but now what we're going to do is Pachu and perhaps Muhammad will join us on Discord, and we're going to practice a couple of the vocabulary words that we learned in this chapter, but the focus will be on pronunciation, accentuation, and intonation. So if you're somebody who wants to improve your accent to sound more natural, or to improve your listening skills, because this really does help you to understand spoken English, then I suggest you stay around for the next hour, because that's what we're going to be focusing on. Okay, well, I'm just going to take a 1 minute break, and then when I return, we're going to start practicing pronunciation, accentuation, intonation, all that fun stuff. Okay. Okay. Thank you for waiting. I'm back. Now let's see. We're going to go over to Discord and uh, wow, it's been so long. I forgot how to use this. Here we go. I think we've got it. Pachu, can you hear me?
Hello, sir.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing great.
Great. Oh, that's wonderful. Okay. All right. Well, let's see. Oh, I have to switch to. Well, Muhammad was here earlier, but I guess, I don't know. I haven't seen him. I don't know if he wants to join us tonight. Let's see. Let me, I've got to move this around. Let me just adjust this so you can see on the screen what we're going to be practicing
Yes.
today. Okay. Can you see the information on the screen yet?
Yes, sir.
What is the first word that you see?
It's a put down.
Put down. Have you seen that before, that phrasal verb?
Yes, yes.
Okay, but put down can mean several different things. So when you see the phrasal verb put down, what does that mean to you usually?
Uh, put down means something we write on or jot down, like jot down.
Yeah, well, jot down means like to write quickly, but put down means to write something to make a record of it so that you don't forget it, so that you can remember it.
Okay.
So that's the difference. If you say I jotted it down, that means I wrote it quickly. But if you say I put
Oh,
it down, that means I wrote it so I could remember it for later.
yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes, yes. I got it.
All right. Okay. So let's start with that one. Let's see. Can you see the example sentence?
Yes, yes, sir.
Okay, can you read it? What does it say?
Please put down your name and phone number on this form.
Okay. Let's start with the. Well, first of all, something that's kind of interesting about phrasal verbs is that sometimes they have a literal meaning and sometimes they have an abstract meaning. And by
Yes.
literal, maybe one thing you could and maybe one way you could interpret that is that the preposition, which in this case is down, has a very
Mm,
strong connection to the object. What is the object?
your name
Your name and your phone number. That's right.
and your phone
Okay.
number.
Now, I'm not, see, this is kind of a relative thing, so maybe this doesn't make sense to you, but to me, that preposition down seems to have a very strong connection. It seems to be related to the object because down to
Okay.
me means like placing it somewhere. I don't know if that makes sense to you.
Yes, yes, I got it. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
So when a phrasal verb, this is something I've noticed. I've never read this in a book, but it's just an observation that when the preposition has a very literal meaning, where there's a connection between the preposition and the object, then you always emphasize the preposition.
Yes.
So you wouldn't say put down, you would say put down. Do you
Okay.
understand?
So yeah, put down.
Hmm. Right. So in this phrase, please put down your name. What are the big words? What would you say are the big words in that phrase?
Hey, name your name.
So which word? Your or name?
The name
Okay. Anything else? What are the other big words in that phrase? Please put down your name.
as a down.
Okay. All right. Can you read that phrase focusing on those two words?
Please put down your name.
Okay. It's probably not a good idea to say down. It's probably better just to say down.
Okay. So please put down your name.
Hmm. And instead of name, do the opposite. Name.
Name, name,
Please put
name.
down. Please put down your name.
Please put down your name.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems like you like to add a little bit extra music to your words.
Yes.
Please put down your name.
Please put down your name.
Hmm. Okay. Uh, Now, in the next phrase, in phone number, in phone number, can you read it?
And and phone number
Hmm.
and phone number.
And so, are there any big words, any strong words in that phrase?
It's a phone. It's
That's right.
phone.
Those two words always go together, phone and number. You always see those words together. And when that happens, you almost always will focus on the first word, phone number,
Yes. It's a
phone number.
phone number.
Hmm.
It's a phone number.
Phone number. Please put down your
It's
name,
a
phone number.
Please put down your name and phone number
Hmm. That's right. Okay. And what is the final phrase in that sentence?
on this form.
So what is the big word? What is the strong word in that phrase?
The form.
Form. Form.
The
How
form.
how many sounds do you hear in there? Form.
Two.
It's two. What are
Oh.
the two sounds?
Oh. Oh.
Oh,
Oh.
oh, oh,
Oh.
form.
Oh.
Mhm.
The form. Oh.
Can you say
Oh.
erm? Say erm.
Um.
Erm. Form.
Po- Poem.
Form. Because if you just give it one sound and you try to say form, that might be really difficult to
Yes.
understand because there are actually two sounds in there.
Yeah. Yeah. I have to correct it. Okay. So, uh, form. Po-
Form.
Form.
That,
Form.
that's better. Form. Form. Can you say
Form.
number on this form?
Number on this form.
Phone number on this form.
Phone number on this form.
Name and phone number on this form.
Name and phone number on this form
Okay, is it name or name?
is a name. It's a
Name,
name.
name and phone number on this form.
Name and phone number on this form.
Please put down your name and phone number on this form.
Please put down your name and phone number on this form.
Okay, how many phrases would you like to divide this sentence into?
So two.
What are the two phrases?
So please put down your name and please put down your name and phone number
Okay.
and on this form.
Okay, so these the two phrases. Please put down your name and phone number, and then the
Yes.
phrases on this form. Okay, and how would you like to sound when you say this? Would you like to sound nice and friendly, or would you like to sound serious?
The serious.
Serious. Okay. So uh, where do you think we should start the low tones to sound serious? Where should that start? Do you think?
Yeah, it's a phone.
Okay, please put down your name and phone number. Name and
It's a
phone number.
phone.
Okay. All right. And maybe, maybe because this is a list, because we've got two things, right? So maybe we'll,
Name and phone.
yeah, but because it's a list, maybe we'll start our list high.
Yes.
Name and phone number. Name and phone
Yeah.
number.
Name and phone number.
Hmm.
Phone number
How should our phrase start?
is a high tone.
So
It's
please put down your name and phone number.
please put down your name and phone number.
Okay. All right. Now in the second phrase,
Is on this form.
okay, what is the important word?
Is a poem. Is a form. Form.
Okay. Now, you see, this is why it's important to recognize when a word has extra sounds in it, or to notice when it does, because I'm just going to put two words here on the screen, and can you see the two words that I've typed up on the screen?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
because you know, in the UK, for example, they don't like to pronounce R's, right?
Yes.
So the only difference between number one and number two is the secret extra sound in number two. Because number one is foam. Foam.
Yeah. Yes.
Say number one.
Poem.
Foam.
Poem.
Foam. Okay. And number two is form.
Form. Form.
Yeah, so actually there are three sounds in there because it's it's faux,
Po.
but in English the O has an oo sound at the end of it always. So this is whoops. This is form.
Okay. So po or
For,
po or
form.
form.
There's a kiss.
Form.
You know that you have to give a kiss in the middle. Form. Form.
Mm, Form.
Mm-hmm.
Form.
Form. Form.
Form. Form.
Fo.
Form.
How do you say?
Form.
Yeah, because in the UK, if they don't pronounce the R, that would sound like form. Form.
Yes. Yes.
But number one would
Form
sound like foam.
is a poem.
Say number one.
Is a poem.
Say number two.
Is a form.
Form. Now listen to the duration. Also, the duration is important because number one is foam. Is that long or short in duration? Foam.
It's short.
But how about number
Short
two? Number two, form.
is a long.
This is how you know the difference. To me, those two words sound very, very different. Even if you don't pronounce the R, they sound very different. Form.
So form.
Hmm.
Form.
So this final
Form.
phrase, this is on this form.
So on this form,
Hmm. And how do you want that to sound? Do you want this to sound serious or nice and friendly? How do you want this to sound?
they are serious.
Serious? Okay, so we'll make it blue to make it sound low. But we have to start it kind of high because we always start our phrases high. So on this form,
On this form,
please put down your name and phone number on this form.
please put please put down your name and phone number on this form.
Okay, Panchu, can you make a what I should put on this form question? How will you do that? What I should put?
So what should I put down
Hmm.
on this form?
Again,
Or what should I put down on this form?
okay, that's nice. And what is the most important word in that question?
The what?
How would the word what plus should plus I, how would that sound?
So what What should I put?
Hmm. What? Okay, but now remember if so, let's just do what should I first. What should I?
What should I? What
What should I?
should I?
What should I? Okay. Now, when you say put down, which word is more important in this case? Is it put or down?
It's down.
Uh, what should I put down?
What should I put down?
Hmm. What should I put down on this form?
What should I put down on this palm?
And you
On
say,
this
please,
pod?
you can just give the answer. Please put down your name and phone number on this form.
Please put down your name and phone number on this form.
Okay, great. Now let's go to our next vocabulary word, which is run off. Now, the last time that when I read chapter 20, we started talking about the word off could mean to leave a place. So, if you say run off, that means you're leaving the place by running. If you say walk off, that means you're leaving the place by walking. So a
Okay.
lot of time, I think that you were even making a note about it. You said, remember, you could put to be off. I'm off. That means I'm leaving, right? Do you remember that?
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
So that word off, that could be the opposite of on, but also many, many times the word off, not always, but many times can mean leaving
Yeah.
in some way.
Living. Yes.
So that's what
Got
we have here. Run off. That means leaving a place by running. Can you read the example sentence in the video on the screen?
it. Okay. Okay. So the dog ran off when it heard a loud noise.
Okay. All right. So the dog ran off when it heard a loud noise. Uh, let's start with the first four words. Can you read the first four words?
The dog ran off when
Okay. Now, here, this preposition off, does it have a special meaning, do you think, here? Does it have a meaning that you could interpret when you look at it and say, oh, I know that means leave?
yes, I
Okay.
notice it,
So, which word do you think is more important in that phrase, run or off?
it's off.
Yeah, it is because this word off has a meaning where you could look at it and say, "Oh, I know what that means."
Yes.
So it's literal. It's not abstract. Sometimes the word off can be abstract, but not here.
Yes.
It has a meaning that you could guess by looking at it. Is that pretty clear? Does that make sense to you?
Yes. Yes. Clear.
All right. So the no. So those first four words, the dog ran off. Any other important
That
word? Just off.
is no, it's a dog.
Yeah, I think dog also, for a couple of reasons.
Yeah.
Okay. So how will you read that?
The dog ran off.
That's right. The dog ran off. You
Yeah.
got the small, big, small, big. The dog ran off.
The dog ran off
Okay. Can you read the next four words?
mm. when it heard when it heard
Okay, four. So when it heard a, when it heard a.
when when it heard a
Okay, what in that phrase, in those four words, what would you say is the most important word?
it's a heard.
Heard. Okay, so how would those four words sound together if you pronounce them in a phrase together?
When it when it when it heard
When it heard
when
a,
it heard
when it heard a, when it heard a,
when he heard when it heard
when it heard a.
when when it heard when it
Dog,
heard
the dog ran off when it heard a.
the dog ran off when it heard
Uh-huh. Heard a.
heard
These are Uh, the R and the D, those are throat sounds. Those are sounds that you eat. And what happens to a vowel sound if you have the throat sounds? Do you remember?
So yes, so loud,
Extra
uh,
long, extra long.
extra long, extra long.
Herda,
Yeah,
her,
yard.
her,
So hard,
her. Same thing with
hard.
the G. That's a throat sound. So it's not dog, but dog. It's very long because that G happens down here in the throat.
Okay, so dog, dog.
Dog ran off when it heard a.
The dog ran off when it heard the
Hmm. And now for the final two words. What are the final two words in that phrase?
say, loud noise.
Loud noise. And what is the important word in that phrase, do you think?
Is loud.
Okay. Is D is that a sound that you push out of your mouth or is that a sound you eat?
Is it
So
loud?
what happens to the vowel sound if the next sound is a sound that you eat?
So so we make is a strong sound,
Mhm.
loud,
It come
sound
extra long.
long. Yeah,
Loud noise.
is loud
The
noise.
dog ran off when it heard a loud noise.
The dog ran off when it heard a loud noise.
That's right. The dog ran off when it heard a loud noise.
The dog ran off when it heard a loud noise.
Okay. How many phrases do you think we could divide this sentence into?
So the dog ran off. So the dog ran off.
Okay, that's one phrase.
Yeah.
So two phrases.
And next is yes, two phrase. And when it heard a loud noise,
Okay, now this first phrase, the dog ran off. Do you want to sound nice and happy or do you want to sound serious?
is happy.
Happy? Okay.
Yes.
So, how will we say this word off? It's the end of a phrase, so it has to be low by the time we finish. But how should it start?
Is high.
Okay,
It's
so
off. It's
off,
how
off, off,
off,
off,
off,
off,
o- off, off.
off. How would the beginning of the phrase? How will it sound? High or low?
Is high.
Okay, the dog ran off.
The the dog ran off.
Okay. And how about in the next phrase? When it heard a loud noise, do you want this to sound happy and nice or serious?
Is happy.
Okay. So, how will you say the final two words? Let's do it like this. So we make the final word low since it's the end of a phrase,
Yes.
but we want to say our special word in a high way. How will you say those two words?
Is loud noise.
Yeah, that's right. Loud noise. Loud noise. Loud noise.
Yeah, loud noise.
Okay.
Loud
And
noise.
how should we start our phrase?
Is high.
Okay. When it heard a loud noise.
When it heard a loud noise.
The dog ran off. When it heard a loud noise.
The dog ran off when it heard a loud noise.
Okay. All right. Pachu, can you make a when dog ran off question? How would you do that?
So when did the dog ran off?
Okay, but you made a mistake. Can you try to do that question again. Fix your mistake.
Sorry. When did the dog run off?
Okay. All right. What is your most important word in that question?
When?
Okay. How would you pronounce when plus did plus the?
When did the?
When,
When did the?
when did the? When did the?
When did the?
When
When did
did the?
the?
When did the? When did the?
When did the?
Hmm.
When did the?
And then in that word run off, which word is more important? Run or off?
It's off.
Oh, okay. So if we say dog run off, how will you pronounce those three words?
Okay. When did the dog run off?
Okay. When did the dog run off?
When did the dog run off?
Hmm. What is the answer? When did the dog run off? What is your answer?
The dog ran off when it heard a loud noise.
The dog ran off when it heard a loud noise.
The dog ran off when it heard a loud noise.
All right. Okay, here's our final expression for today, our final vocabulary for today.
Yes.
Something is at stake. Have you ever seen that before? That's very common.
Yes.
What does that mean? Something is at stake.
Yeah, stake means very important or parity
Hmm.
uh, work.
Maybe you could think that something is at risk or something is in danger of being lost, something like that.
Okay, okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes,
Read
yes.
read the read the example sentence. What does it say?
They were working hard because their future is at stake in this exam.
What does that mean? They're working hard. What does that mean? Their future is at stake.
So the future is at a risk
Yeah, at
in this
risk,
exam.
in danger, something like that.
Yeah.
So if they fail the test, then their future is
Yes,
okay.
yes,
Does that make sense?
yeah, yes.
Where are the children today? I don't hear the children in the background. They, well, what time is it?
No,
It's nighttime.
no, no. Elder son went to school, and younger is sleeping on this
Okay,
bed on
so quiet.
another side.
It's so quiet.
Yeah, and my wife went on job, so I am alone.
So you have like one moment of quiet.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Now,
I
if we look at the first one, two, three, the first three words, what are the first three words
yeah.
in that sentence?
So they are working.
Okay, well, the first four words.
Okay, they are working hard.
Okay, in that sentence, in that phrase, they're working hard. Can what would you say is the most important word?
So they work hard.
Yeah, hard. I would say it's hard. Okay. All right. So how would if the other words are not so important, how do you say those four words together?
So they are working hard.
Mhm. They're working hard.
They're working hard
Hmm. Let's look at the next three words. Can you read the next three words?
um, because their future
Okay. Now, in that phrase, because they're future, what would you say is the most important word?
is a future.
Future. Okay. Which syllable has all of the power in that word? Future.
Few.
Few. Okay. So we have they're working hard because their future.
They're working hard because their future
Okay. And the next three words, what are the next three words?
is i- is at stake. Is
Okay.
at a stake.
Now, which word in that phrase is most important, do you think?
Is a stake.
Steak. Okay. So you have to give it special power. Steak. Steak.
Stake.
They're working hard because
Stake.
the future is at stake.
They're working hard because their future is a stake.
Okay. And what are the final three words?
In this exam.
Okay. What is the most, I think you already did it, but tell me anyway. What is the most important word in this phrase?
Exam.
Exam. And where's all the power? Where's all the force in that word?
Exam.
Exam. Zam.
Exam.
Zam. Okay. In this exam.
In in this exam.
Hmm.
Exam.
They're working hard because their future is at stake in this exam.
They're working hard because their future is at stake in the exam. In this exam.
Okay. And what would you say are how many phrases could you divide this sentence into?
So they're working hard.
Okay.
Yeah.
What else?
Uh, and next is because their future is at stake.
Okay.
And last is in the exam. In this exam.
Okay.
The three phrase.
All right. Now the first phrase, they're working hard. How do you want this to sound? Do you want this to sound nice and happy, or do you want it to sound serious?
It is serious.
Okay. So we'll make this important word low. But how should we
Yeah.
start our phrase?
It's high.
So how does
I
this
think.
sound? If you say this phrase, how will it sound?
S- They are working hard.
They're working hard. They're working hard.
They are working hard.
Okay. Now, how about the second phrase? How do you want that to sound? Do you want that to sound nice and friendly or serious?
So serious.
Okay, serious. When you say, you shouldn't say serious, you should say serious. That's a big sound in the beginning.
Okay, so serious.
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 All right. So
Serious.
we'll make that important word steak. We'll make that low. Is it steak? But how should we start our phrase? Should we start it high or low?
It's a high tone.
Okay. Because their future is at stake.
Because their future is at stake.
They're working hard because their future is at stake.
They are working hard because their future is at stake.
Okay. How do you say this word here? At. How do you pronounce that? At.
At a,
How?
at at
Okay.
a, at a
Well, if I say that word at, is that a long sound or a big sound?
is a long.
Okay. And, especially for somebody like me, I don't like to pronounce final T's. So that sound is very important because that could be the only signal that I'm saying the word at. So even though sometimes these little words can become condensed, can become small, I wouldn't do that with the word at. So maybe it would sound better if you said at stake, and you made.
At stake.
Yeah, just because it's like the only way that I know that you're saying at, because maybe you don't really pronounce the T. I don't.
Okay,
At
so
stake.
at stake.
Yeah.
At stake.
Their future is at stake.
because their future is at stake.
Hmm. They're working hard because their future is at stake.
They are working hard because their future is at stake.
At, at,
Okay, so a- at stake
mhm,
is at stake.
at stake.
At stake.
Then it would be very clear. Okay, and in our final phrase, in this exam, how do you want to sound? Do you want to sound happy and nice and friendly, or serious?
It is
So
serious.
we'll
It
just
is
make it
serious.
serious, serious. It's a long sound there.
It is
Serious.
serious.
Okay.
Serious.
But how should we start our phrase?
Uh, is a high tone.
Okay, so how does that sound? How will you pronounce that?
They, so ig, exam.
In this
Exam.
in this exam. In this exam.
So in this exam.
Hmm. In this exam.
In this exam.
They're working hard because their future is at stake. In this exam.
They are working hard because their future is stake in the exam.
In this, can you say in this, in this, in this,
In this
in this,
in this
in this exam?
this in this exam.
Can you say in this
In
egg?
this
And say in this egg. In this egg. In this egg.
in this egg. In this egg.
In this exam.
In this exam.
Hmm. They're working hard because their future is at stake. In this exam.
They are working hard because their future is at stake in this exam.
Can you make a why they working hard question?
Why are they working hard?
Hmm. And what is the most important word in your question?
So why?
Why? So how does that sound if it's very important?
So why are they working?
How will why sound? Just the word why. How does that sound? If it's an important word, how does it sound?
It's a long. It's a why. It's a
Why?
why.
Why? How will you say why plus are plus they?
So why are they? So
Why are
why are they?
not why are they, but why are they? Why are they?
Why are they? Why are they?
Uh-huh. What about working? Is that an important uh well, what are the next two words? Why are they
Why are they? Why are they working hard?
what are the other important words in that question?
It's a hard.
Hard. Hard.
It's a
Hard.
hard.
Why are they working
hard.
hard?
Why are they working hard?
That's right. Why are they working hard?
Why are they working hard?
Okay, and what is your answer?
They are working hard because their future is at stake in this exam.
Okay, they're working hard because their future is at stake in this exam.
They are working hard because their future is stake in this exam.
Is at stake. Is at stake. Is at stake.
Is at stake. Is at stake.
Working hard because their future is at stake with this exam.
They are working hard because their future is at stake in this exam.
Okay. All right. Well, that's all I've got. So I think we'll finish here for today. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Hopefully, I'll be back tomorrow morning. For some reason, I've been waking up late, but I'll try to wake up on time and do Gone with the Wind in the morning. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody,
Okay.
for your questions and comments. And I hope you come back when we continue practicing. All right.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.